landed where we're supposed to land, we're going to get this party started. So I believe that we are live, and welcome everyone to Creative on Purpose Live. To learn more about Creative on Purpose, visit creativeonpurpose.com, and let's get going with the difference only you can make. Remember that this broadcast is also an iTunes podcast. Check it out and leave a 5-star review. 30 seconds of your generosity helps spread the goodness delivered by my guests. Let's get to today's show. Welcome to Creative on Purpose Live. These conversations are about flying higher and endeavors that make a difference. Do the work you're meant to do now. It's time to be creative on purpose. Are you ready? Let's go. I'm your host, Scott Perry, author of Onward and Difference Maker Coach at Creative on Purpose. Visit creativeonpurpose.com to start stepping into possibility with the difference only you can make. This month, we're profiling members of the Difference Maker community at Creative on Purpose. Let's meet today's guest. Kathy Taylor, welcome to the broadcast. Please tell our viewers who you are, what you're up to these days, and where can they connect to learn more about you and the difference that you're making.
Well, thank you, Scott. It's always good to be on here with you. I am a coach who helps people learn to trust themselves and become confident not only in what they're doing, but in who they are, because that's really what needs to come first. You can find me at herdwiseleadershipcoaching.com. What was your other question?
What are you up to these days?
What am I up to these days? I am serving my coaching clients to help them, like I said before, become more confident in themselves by trusting their inner knowing instead of having to feel like they've always got to ask a million opinions or take polls or doubt themselves. Even though it's interesting, though, doubt is actually part of confidence. So
that's a really interesting, I like that phrase, inner knowing. Tell us a little bit more about what that means.
Well, to me, it's, we've all got that still small voice inside of us, and it gets so drowned out by all of the other voices, all of the internet, all of the social media, all of the stuff we just consume that, I'm kind of getting this picture in my mind right now of this little tiny seed, and it's just getting pounded with water, and it never has a chance to grow because it's just got too much stuff that's coming in. Whereas if it's planted, carefully with joy and love in the right soil, which by the way has manure in it because it always does. Then, you add a little bit of water and then it cracks open and it grows. But we're always scared, I think, of that little cracking open. Like, is that really can I trust the cracking open? Well, really we have to, because that's growth. It's the process of cracking open and having something grow. And it's a process that happens every day, not just within us, but you can see it in nature. So it's just part of the world that we live in.
Yeah, I love that metaphor, that analogy of the seed cracking open. So primarily you are coaching. Give us a sense of who your ideal clients are in terms of the coaching and how you're cracking them open.
Well, I'd say there sort of are two. One is I'm burned out, or I'm on the edge of burnout. I've been trying this for so hard for so long, and I never seem to get anywhere, and I'm ready to give up. So they kind of need to, those people anyway, need to learn what rest is, and really feel into that and be okay with not doing, because again, our world is very doing focused. And then the sort of the flip side of that is, once they've done that, how can they get focused to take the action that is purposeful and intentional, instead of just doing a bunch of stuff so that they look like they're doing stuff, but really it's just busy work to make them feel better. So it kind of feels, again, sort of better on the outside, but feels sort of anxious on the inside. So getting rid of that anxiety and replacing it with peace.
Love that. So I love how you talked about the first part, the burnout and just kind of the grinding, because high achievers, people that are in leadership positions, executives, the kind of people that you coach, people that are already performing at a high level, frequently are experiencing that burnout. They have ground themselves into a fine powder, oftentimes emotionally, spiritually, mentally, they have very little left in the tank. Why do you think it is that is the default setting for so many of us that have this desire to achieve at a high level and to tap or not tap, but to, develop our potential, maybe tap our promise as well? And what is it that we can do to help stop the grinding and do a little of the thriving, even as we're striving?
Well, that's interesting. I have a little group on the second Tuesday or something, each conversations that matter. And last night our discussion was about enough. And it was really interesting and really deep. And we talked about where are, I'm going to grab my notes real quick from that conversation. What are the implications? Like what are the other implications of enough? And so we talked about enough, not just from the perspective of, enough time, enough money, enough food, sort of what I would say was more material things, but really more, are you enough? And the are you enough touched things like trusting yourself, the idea of proving, clarity, shame, receiving well, and then productivity. And the main thing around all of those was we look to external things to tell us we're enough. Are we making enough money? I don't know. Am I making enough money, as much money as the person next to me? Or am I as knowledgeable as that person? What else do I need to learn? I mean, that's where it shows up for me, is I'm such a learner. I'm thinking I've got to know everything about this or else I'm not going to be good enough. And so I'll dive into this deep or dive into that really deep. And the truth of the matter is, if we're born enough. And I'm actually now thinking back to, I read a book one time, I'm not really sure who it was, maybe Henry Nguyen, where he said, he took care of someone who was basically bedridden and an invalid for their whole life. And this person lived to be like 80 years old, if I'm remembering correctly. And he said one of the things that he learned is that this person had value because they were a person, not because they did anything. And that that learning and that inner knowing that he got from that really changed him as a person and helped. So if we can realize the value that we have simply because we exist, and that the other stuff we do is it's a way to connect with people. The other thing that I heard today that I thought was really interesting was from a book you recommended, actually, called Community by Peter Block. And the question, I don't remember exactly what they said in there, but the question that came to my mind was, what if the problems that we have are simply so that we can connect with each other?
Yeah, that Peter Block book is so undervalued and underknown. It's a fantastic book.
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend it to anybody. You touched on a whole bunch of themes, and I just like to tug at three threads that I heard. The first is, and I wrote about this recently in Onward, this proclivity that people like us have to conflate productivity with progress, and they're really different things. You touched on this. A lot of us have the capacity and the ability and the talent to do a lot of things, to complete a lot of tasks. That doesn't necessarily equate to making progress in a meaningful enterprise where we can actually make a difference in the lives of those that we serve or just in our circle of contents. The other thing that I heard was, and you and I have spoken about this in our sessions, this idea of being sufficient even while you strive. You are always simultaneously enough just as you are, and you are also a creature that is aspiring to be better, do better, serve more, develop your potential, deliver on your promise. But then you touched on something that I just can't resist asking you about, because I know that one of my favorite quotes has become one of your favorite quotes. So talk a little bit more about this idea that comes from our favorite Goethe quote. As soon as you trust yourself, you will know how to live. What does it mean what does it mean for you to trust ourselves? And why is it so important if we are going to learn how to live, meaning learn how to live better?
So yeah, I totally latched onto that quote, and I'm still sucking the marrow out of it there. To me, it's related to being connected to ourselves, because in order to trust ourselves, we have to know ourselves. And that includes knowing our feelings and what they are saying to us. Because I don't believe that we have these emotions just to express them. Mm-hmm. They have a message for us that we're supposed to use and then temper the expression. So even today on Facebook, I challenged somebody about, anger is just a wasted emotion. If you were angry with somebody and they died today, would you be really mad that or would you be really sad or disappointed that you had wasted this time being angry with them? And so I said, well, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And the idea that anger generally often means that a boundary has been crossed. And while I don't need to lash out at someone in anger, that there are, healthy and unhealthy ways to express it, but that it does have a message for me. And so to pay attention to that message. So if I pay attention to the message, I'm aware of the feelings, then I'm aware of my needs, and I can't get my needs met if I'm not aware of them. So how can if I can't know what I need, how can anyone else know what I need? Yeah. And so it just becomes this ongoing, this cyclical thing about trusting myself in order to trust others, in order to trust myself, in order to trust others. And it's just, and that's the living. Yeah. Yeah.
So I totally agree. I discovered that Goethe quote years ago, and I've been meditating on it ever since. And I don't think you can ever stop, because that journey of trusting yourself so that you can learn how to live the good life, live a better life at every moment, even as you're making progress in that journey. Whatever got you where you are is not going to get you where you want to go. So the trust that got you to the success that you're experiencing is not enough to get you to the next step in your progress as a human being, who's doing work with and for others, and in an effort to improve things, make things better for everyone. Curious about this work that you do with HerdWise Leadership Coaching and the people that you work with. What's the biggest challenge for you in the difference that you seek to make through HerdWise Leadership Coaching?
Oh gosh, the biggest challenge is having potential clients understand what it really means to be connected to yourself, because it's such a foreign idea that it's like we don't even know what we don't know. So they're at this unconscious incompetence. And so they don't have a problem, or so they think. So trying to get them to a place where they feel safe enough to recognize that even though I thought I was connected to myself this whole time, I'm really not. That's a big jump, a big step, to think that I thought I was being real and I thought I was being present and authentic all this time, and I really wasn't. Oh my gosh, all that time was wasted. Well, no, it wasn't wasted. Because if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't have got to where you were now. And now is the time that you can take that step. So be with it now and be okay with it now, and just take the next step.
Yeah. Yeah. So important to always look for the silver linings, or at least the lessons that come from, what we might at first blush interpret as failures or missed opportunities. One of the things that you just referenced is something that I definitely have seen in my work as a coach, and I know that you are really really top notch at in your own work. But you and I are met initially through Akimbo workshops, and one of the powers of being in those programs is that you are surrounded by people that are on a different journey than you, but it's still a similar journey. Everybody in an Akimbo workshop, regardless of which workshop it is engaged in a journey to improve themselves through improving skills about whatever their endeavor is. And although you can learn about that in books and in other online courses and by listening to TED Talks, the beauty of the Akimbo workshops is that you're doing that work in a cohort with and for a group of fellow travelers. There's a fellowship built into the workshops. And what coaches like you and I tend to be really good at, and what people in the workshops tend to be really good at, is helping other people see what's in their way, usually something they put in their own way, and helping them see it in a way that they can't unsee it, so that they have to then find a way around, through, or to flip that into an opportunity. And even though you and I are really good at doing that for other people, we tend to not be very good at doing that for ourselves. And so I'm just curious, with all of that, if in this work that you're doing, and in this work that people like you and I do, and all the other people that we know in Forward Link and other places, we can't do meaningful work. We can't do this meaningful and important work without making mistakes from time to time. In fact, some would argue if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. So knowing that, I'm just curious about, what's a mistake that you've made that that really has stuck with you? How did you rectify that situation? Or if you weren't able to rectify it, what's the lesson that you took that helped you use that as a learning opportunity to further develop yourself and do better next time?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm thinking of a mistake I just made this morning. That it's because it's kind of one of those things that you think, okay, I made a mistake, I've rectified it, but yet it shows up again in this, in a different way, in a different layer. And something that I have been working on that I didn't even, kind of like before, I didn't even know I was working on it. But, I work with people with horses sometimes, or let me rephrase that, because sometimes people think they have to have a horse to work with me. People come to me and interact with my horses by not riding them, but just interacting with them. And horses have this way, they're honest for the most part about what's going on. Like they don't really hide things like we do. Or let me put it this way. They don't tell a story about what we're doing and what they're doing, whereas we always do. So they don't put a whole lot of meaning to it. They just do what they do. So let me think. Now I've gotten distracted here. Okay. So it's this whole, what would you call it? Distinction between relationship or connection and the task. And people say horse people are so connected to their horses, but oftentimes the horse is really connected to them and the person's just giving orders. Mm-hmm. That's a really harsh way of saying it, but that's ultimately what it is. And we do that a lot with ourselves too. We'll give ourselves an order, we'll just go do it. That's where the productivity or the busyness comes in, that productivity versus the progress. Mm-hmm. So when we're not connected to ourselves, we're doing a lot of productivity, but not doing so much progress because that connection part is missing. So to be connected with ourselves, or I should say, and at the same time, another person, is really a challenge because our brains are not, we haven't practiced that in our brains very much because we're told from when we're really little, do this and you'll get good grades, write your penmanship well. So even just this morning, I was meeting with someone online and I showed up kind of like, okay, let's go. And they showed up like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, okay, I'm good, let's go. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, okay, so they were so totally the connection, and I was the task, and so it was this very subtle thing, and I've learned it before out with my horses, but then you forget the lesson, so you got to learn it again. How can I stay connected for the sake of connection instead of, yes, I'm connected, but I'm using this connection as a means to an end, as a means to get something done, because it's a very different relationship when you're just hanging out with somebody for the joy and the delight of being there with them versus, hey, I'm doing this for a purpose, and oh, you're really nice, I'm really nice, let's do something cool together.
Yeah, I love that. Uh, being a top performer, being a high achiever, being productive, and even being somebody that's at least desiring to make progress, we tend to be very goal oriented, and it's easy to get fixated on the goal, and the goal is always in the future. It's not present. And if you can't zoom out and in and zoom back and forth, because what I'm hearing, what you're saying is it's so important to start where you are, which is we're here right now. We're in communion. We have a collaborative enterprise going here, a communication, a discussion. And you have to really start with that and not be so fixed on the goal that you're just grabbing somebody by the hair and saying, come on, let's go. We're going to get where you said you wanted to go, and I'm going to get you there as quickly as possible. And I know that I wrestle with that quite a bit too, because this kind of speaks to what we were just talking about. We can so clearly see what the other person doesn't yet see that all we want to do is solve it for them. But the best coaching happens when you just continue to ask the questions that help the person see the problem and solve it for themselves. And that's when the real change and the real transformation can happen. I also love the way that you incorporate the horses into your coaching practice, even though I'm terrified of horses. I will probably never be a client of yours in that context. Although maybe that's what I have to get over. Who knows? But one of the things that you were touching on that I think is so important is how most of us grew up in a very compliance oriented society, schooling, employment, where we are rewarded for our ability to do as we're told and to do what's expected. I'm imagining, based on my limited experience with horses, horses are not prone to compliance, especially by somebody that doesn't know what the heck they're doing with the horses. And so I'm just wondering how the work with the horses might really help with somebody that has that kind of controlling or kind of just too focused on the outcomes and not focused on being in the experience as it's being lived in the moment. How does working with the horses help with that?
Well, that sounds like me right there that you just described. Yeah, that's one thing I really learned was it's like, yes, I want to have a connection with my horse. So let's build this connection so we have a connection. So it's like I was using the task to get to the relationship. And it's just not very fulfilling on either end, because what you end up with is compliance. And actually horses are quite compliant. They can be like, how many horses or people, because we actually respond quite similarly. Okay, yeah, I have to go do this. Okay, I'll go do it. They don't do it with any joy. Kids, people, adults, horses, they don't do it with any joy. They just kind of do it because, well, this is what we do. And there's not an actual relationship that's between there, or I guess it's a relationship. It's just not a very fulfilling one, and it doesn't necessarily go both ways. So working with the horses, it's so nuanced that, I've got a horse, Isaac. He's an ex-race horse, and they're quite compliant because they're told when to eat, when to go out, and when to run, when to do everything. Hold still so we can do your feet. Let me trim this. Let me clip that. They just get a lot of stuff done to them. So they shut down, even though they might be So their nervous system shuts down to a point, and then they might explode like he likes to do because they just can't handle it anymore. But it's not, it's just like, it's like tamping everything down. And so then it explodes instead of actually learning how to regulate it and manage it and be in charge of yourself and your emotions. It's that whole like lashing out in anger sort of thing, like I talked about earlier. And we learn to do that too. We're really good at being compliant, like you talked about before with education. And then they want us to grow up and be independent thinkers, but we haven't been taught that. So it's a real challenge. So then we just kind of go to the other extreme and just go, well, this is how it must be done. And we still don't have any connection with ourselves. And we just go do a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, what I love about your brand and the work that you do with the horses is that it's so rich with, things like horse sense, right? And Penny has been in the chat on the Facebook page talking about how she's very goal related. She has to remind herself to have fun. And so I'm thinking horseplay, is
yes.
to have all these analogies attached to your brand are just really, really exquisite.
Yeah, that's my tagline for a long time. When I was doing a lot of teamwork, I said transforming teamwork through horseplay.
Yeah, I love that.
Because I wanted there to be that, and because there's so much more lightness and joy, and we learn better when there's lightness and joy and play than when we try really, really hard.
Yeah. Well, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. I think it's the way I always try to think about it, because it's, work that's worth doing is work that is joyful, is work that's, by definition also challenging and difficult, but if it's approached with the spirit of playfulness and, with the idea that I'm going to learn something here no matter what happens, then we really have an opportunity to, to stop suffering and to start experiencing greater sense of thriving, even as we are doing the difficult work, striving. So just a couple last questions before we wrap up. I want to just acknowledge that you are a member of the Difference Maker Coaching Program and a member of our Difference Maker Coaching community. Just wondering, we have talked, DJ referenced the necessity of a support system in doing the difficult and challenging work of making change happen. Any words about how the Difference Maker program or community has helped you in your efforts to do what you do better and to have more impact along the way?
Yeah, so going back to that, I don't know, what would you call it? It's not really a duality, but that pairing of connection and task, right? So the endeavor is we want to get something done, but doing it by ourselves is lonely and not very much joy. And where do you get joy? You get the joy in the connection. So the community provides that connection. I mean, I have met some of the coolest people from that group, and they've enriched my life. And going on that journey together with someone, when you're all going, well, this is my problem. Oh yeah, I've had the same problem. Here's how I got through it. Oh, but you've not had that problem. Well, let me help you with that. So it's just this very reciprocal thing, but it's not an expectation kind of thing. And it's just enriching is all I can say. It greases the wheels to keep things moving. Yeah.
Well, I will be the first to say that our community is a very special bunch, and the people that gather for our weekly sessions always enrich my experience, and I'm theoretically the leader. And I probably learn more than anybody in those sessions. I especially enjoy our roundtable discussions, but even just hearing other people share their experiences in the Friday office hours or what have you. And those are places where we do just what we talked about. People share their challenges, or what we call challenge opportunities. They get to tap the wisdom of the herd, and then they see things from a different perspective. They glean an insight, or they have a new way of approaching it. It's just so profound to me how, even though everybody in that community is very goal-oriented, very driven, and very successful in their own way, how we all can do it better when we get together and work on problems. Last question before we wrap things up. This is a session all about difference making, and I'm sure that on both LinkedIn and on the Facebook page, we have a lot of people that are either trying to advance in the difference that they seek to make or aspire to find and develop the difference that they seek to make. What's one tip or piece of advice that you would share for anybody that aspires to or wants to advance in making the difference that only they can make?
Well, I'll go back to the quote.
I'm shocked.
Know yourself so that you can trust yourself, because then you know you're on the right path and you know that you're doing the right thing for yourself and for those that you want to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is an exquisite place to leave things. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Kathy and I really appreciate you lending us some of your valuable time and attention. And we hope that today's broadcast motivates you to lean into an endeavor that matters with greater curiosity and courage. Learn more about Kathy Taylor and HerdWise Leadership Coaching at herdwiseleadershipcoaching.com. And of course, it's always great to see you at creativeonpurpose.com. Now, go out and make the difference that only you can make and keep flying higher. Kathy Taylor, thanks so much for your time on today's broadcast.
Thanks, Scott.